Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. This segment is presented by Charles Schwab. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining us for this segment, we have Dr. Jan Liphardt, CEO of OpenMind, as well as Alex Gunz, fund manager at Heptagon Capital. We're here to discuss building with a cybersecurity-first mindset in an increasingly autonomous world. It is great to have the both of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Jan, let's kick this off. Cybersecurity, it's becoming more direct, it's becoming more visceral as the world continues to lever itself to autonomous vehicles, robots, and virtually everything that emerging technology is applied to.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are moving extremely quickly, and most people aren't really aware of just how quickly robotics is developing. And just in a few weeks, we'll have autonomous robots in people's homes here in the Bay Area. And that makes questions about security, should you trust this robot, just much more direct and just much more practical than it's ever been.
Yeah. And Alex, we've spoken about this before in a number of emerging technology segments, but it's only as good as the data that they're trained on.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Jill. I mean, we said right at the very outset when we started thinking about the future and then looking at how to invest in it, is that the amount of data produced and consumed is only growing exponentially. That's a given, but that data will have zero value unless you secure it, you store it, and you analyze it. And simply as data is getting broader and more complex, and we're applying it away from just computers into physical entities, whether they're robots or vehicles, this importance of securing it only increases.
Yeah, it does. And Jan, it's interesting when we think about cybersecurity, it's usually more through the compliance or the core technology end. What kind of responsibility and new pressures is it putting on scientists and engineers and designers as they now have to critically think about cyber first when it comes to modeling and developing?
Well, a lot of roboticists, for example, they're not necessarily concerned about security in the first instance. Maybe their life mission is to develop highly capable hands, or maybe their mission is to develop robots that are empathetic and can make you laugh or cry. But of course, as you develop those technologies, at the back of your mind, you always have to be thinking about security as well. A great example is at a university that I won't name. They made it possible for anyone on Earth to use the robots in the lab for education and teaching. And of course, the first thing that happened is as soon as that capability was unlocked, someone decided to remote control the humanoid to open the lab doors from the inside. And that, of course, allows anyone to get into the building. And that's just one of many sort of new things that engineers have to consider when they're allowing many other people to interact with robots, for example.
And well, Jan, they also have to think about too. I'm going to use, U.S. privacy law as an example
Uh-huh.
here. EU, of course, is GDPR. But when you think about data and being compliant with HIPAA as an example, it kind of has to go into design and how you're going to engineer these things. Even medical devices, like your watch. Right, it's already happening now. So you almost have to have working knowledge of the compliance and security mindset with these types of robots.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And that's actually what's driving a lot of the hardware and also chip architectures. NVIDIA's new architecture for humanoid, the Thor computer, that's designed to do a lot of inference at the edge. And they built in a lot of functionality relating to privacy, preserving compute, and also trusting the hardware. And that sort of capability allows you to do face recognition, for example, at the edge without needing to transmit data with face information into the cloud. That's really important, for example, if you deploy a humanoid into a kindergarten. Imagine the volume of sensitive data that is available. And so the more we can push the sensitive, privacy relevant calculations directly into the brain of the humanoid at the edge, the safer it is.
Yeah. And speaking of safety and innovation, what about the autonomous vehicles, Alex? There is some progress that's being made there. And it's actually one of those areas where it's not go fast and break things. Some companies are being pretty deliberate about their approach here.
Yeah, I think you touch on a very valid point there, Jill, and where safety is involved, the importance of actually going slowly is absolutely integral. And I think the data speaks for itself, really. The figures I've seen would suggest that Waymos have driven something like 50 million miles now in both San Francisco and in Phoenix. And yet the accident rate has been about 80% lower than you would actually get were humans at the wheel. And I think this really reinforces the idea that by having gone slowly, by having been very thoughtful, you've actually arrived at the outcome that is really desired. Because in order to go to this sort of trust level, if you will, where you're happy to have a robot driving the car rather than a human being at the wheel, you have to get in and feel 100% comfortable that it is going to work.
Yeah. I would also, argue to autonomous vehicles, it's very idiosyncratic to certain cities in the US. To your point, San Francisco, I think, there probably is more testing when you look at different demographics and different geographies within the US. And I'm sure they're testing that. I mean, that's science at the end of the day, Alex. Sometimes failure is a good thing, and this is how you learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, Jill. And whilst I was very impressed on my last trip to the States, just how well it worked, particularly in a city like San Francisco, where you've got the hills and so on. The challenge is when you actually say take it into Europe, where you've got narrower streets. The streets in the States are a lot wider. You talk to a lot of people in the industry, and somewhere complex like an airport, where you've got lots of vehicles sort of arriving, departing, people lifting luggage out. That's another complex use case. And then clearly, when you're in city centers, you're driving at 20, 30 miles an hour. And therefore, were there an accident, the impact, the risk of injury is so much lower than it would be on a motorway. So I think anyone talking about what we call this sort of autopia, if you will, a future where every single vehicle is going to be driverless, that's still some way off. But I think the reality is that more and more use cases, more and more experimentation will only allow all the stakeholders to gain more confidence.
Yeah. Jan, when you think about human in the loop and the advances that are being made with robotics, what are your thoughts? It's not going to completely remove humans. I think it can only help enhance, some of the efficiencies that we're looking to accomplish.
Yeah. So one thing that Waymo did was they had a human very close to the system for many, many years. Imagine all the edge cases that Alex just mentioned, accidents or a passenger spilling their coffee in the back, or narrow roads and things like that. And for many, many years, a human was very, very close to the machine to help it. We're seeing the same thing play out with deployments of robots into households, where if the robot gets stuck or doesn't know what to do, it can basically call for help. And then a human nurse or a human teacher or a human police officer can directly teleport into the brain of the machine, see what's going on, and take control of that situation. And of course, you can use those events to further improve the capabilities of the machine. And that's almost certainly going to be true for at least the next 5 or 10 years. That opens up lots of interesting possibilities. We just did an experiment where a human in the Philippines was able to take groceries in a US supermarket and put the groceries into a shopping cart. And that's an example of where the technology allows humans anywhere on Earth to start competing for jobs anywhere else on Earth that involve a physical component. Imagine like Instacart or DoorDash all of a sudden being able to employ people in many, many time zones.
Yeah. I want to switch gears for a moment here, Jan, something that's personal, near and dear to me. What are your thoughts around the importance of academia and R&D and how it's really helping to advance a lot of these emerging technologies that we're now going from use case to practical application? I think, the incubators that come out of academia and where you test and fail and learn cannot be overstated.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's two major roles for academe. One role is to try out crazy things and invent and really push the technology envelope. It's important to realize that something like Waymo reflects decades of research at universities all around the world. And the culmination of that is that all of a sudden Alex can get into a Waymo in San Francisco and go places, and there's no human driver. The other role for academe is to train talented, curious, excited humans that, of course, the tech companies need as employees then to get this technology out there. And so everything you're seeing in AI or automation or robotics, please remember, there's been decades of basic research that came before that.
Yeah. Alex, from an investment perspective, are we still in early innings? Are there identifiable areas within the market that have direct exposure to robotics, or are there derivative plays off of it?
I think that clearly the main story in the investment world at the moment, as is abundantly evident pretty much everywhere you look, is this idea about AI. And AI today, it seems very much about investing in the hardware and then hoping that the use cases will come along. And nearly all of the use cases today are desktop based, effectively using LLMs and other similar tools to increase productivity. We think that actually what's going to be quite exciting, albeit that it's harder to invest in it directly today, certainly in the public equity world, is when, as we've been talking about, and some of the scenarios Jan and I have touched on, where AI moves to being sort of physical or embodied AI. Waymos are a really good case study of that. Humanoid robots are another really good case study. And I think when you look at the sort of dynamics, i.e. we've got an aging population, we've got a retiring population, the logic of actually having humanoids deployed into factories, helping elderly people, working in hospitals, that's really where the excitement's going to be in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And also what it could do from a physical therapy perspective, or how it can help paraplegics, as an example, have a life that is not as, what's the right word, where they're not hindered from being able to do what it's required to get through daily life that we sometimes take for granted. I think there's so much that it can be done here when you think about, wrapping in medical emerging technologies and what it can do, because to your point, demographics are impacting the global economy. We've seen it in Japan, we're seeing it in the US, you're seeing it in some areas in Europe where these demographics are going to matter at some point.
By 2040, Jill, the figure is going to be that in the Western world, you're going to see about a 4% shortfall in the manufacturing population, as in people who are able to perform roles in factories. And you're going to see about a 2% shortfall in terms of people required to support the elderly, whether that's in hospitals, whether that's in care homes. And in order to fill that gap most efficiently, we think that's where humanoids come in. And the point that I sense many investors or many sort of people watching, listening to this segment perhaps miss, is that today, when you look at these robots, they are the most expensive and the least efficient they will ever be. And as the technology improves, the marginal cost of actually adding one new robot into the population, if you will, is only going to come down, and therefore the economics, the payback period, will only improve.
So, Jan, to wrap up here, if you think 3 to 5 years out, or perhaps even 10 years out, when it comes to scalability, affordability, making it ubiquitous within our society, is it realistic?
Absolutely. We're seeing some robotics companies announce humanoids at a sub $10,000 USD price point. The cognitive capabilities and the spatial navigation capabilities and the caregiving capabilities are advancing week by week, very, very quickly. And the main barriers that we see are no longer at the software or hardware level. They're much more on the regulatory side, or unions, or insurance. So we're running up against really practical questions relating to, as we're deploying humanoids into households, where do we get insurance? What are the regulation? What does the nurses union say? And of course, all of those are important business considerations and important stakeholders. Those are the main barriers right now. It's no longer hardware or software.
All right. Appreciate both of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.